Hey, of you delicious people, I am here today to review Batman The Long Halloween. Immediately, I would really go into saying that I realize that this movie is an adaptation from a comic book. I know a lot of people hold this comic book into high regard, and I know that this is adapted, so me having good or bad points about it is kind of irrelevant because really a lot of people will probably go into probably just watching this regardless, which is perfectly fine. I'm gonna do this as if this thing is not adapted from somewhere, because I think it's starting to come more apparent now. That's what the real true Warner Brothers animated department is kind of doing now. They're just easily adapting things instead of actually coming up with a real, true, legitimate, good story themselves, which is perfectly fine. However, they want to float their boat is perfectly fine. I love these DC animated films for the most point, but there is some stuff here that I would just say, yeah, like some of the more recent things, I've started to realize just how just kind of slow or boring that they are, and this movie is honestly no exception. Uh, the real true description of this movie that I can take away from is long. This is an hour and 25-minute film that feels way longer than it actually is. Probably the entire highlight of this movie is probably when Joker actually comes in, because then there's actually something actually exciting going on in this film. Because a bulk of this film is a whodunit film. There seems to barely be any of action in this movie, and when there is action, it's disinteresting. A lot of this movie is to focus on Falcone and the Falcone family, because yeah, if anything, whenever they've really just done a Batman movie, they really focused on the Falcone family being the real true prominent role in a Batman film. Does that make sense to anybody? No, it doesn't. But like I argue to say that there's just these little splishes and splashes of Batman world characters to try to keep people interested, but really, I also didn't understand. There's a whole sewer part in this movie that I'm like, shouldn't they gone with this character, but instead they have this character? What? Shouldn't that have obviously been this person in this film? But maybe that's how the original way of doing things was to be placed into the Long Halloween comic book. Because a lot of times when you get an adaptation, they will drastically adjust story or drastically adjust things, and it won't seem like the original books. If this stays true to the source material, then I'm just kind of like, okay, well, why didn't they go this direction in any variation of this? But so the only cutesy little things that I do like about this movie is people getting prepared for a holiday. I like that. I like some of the characters that do get slipped in here, but it's very few. But yeah, there's something that I can like about this film, but it's probably like a 5% liking and 95% just going like, man, this is I can't wait for them to milk out all these other films to actually hope to give us something much more intriguing somewhere down the line. Because I'm sure they're probably going to bust it out into probably 3 or 4 parts, probably. I'm assuming or assessing. Because they have nothing else to put out right now. That feels kind of obvious. It kind of feels like every video or movie or whatever that they put out kind of feels very thin. It kind of feels like they're desperately trying to figure out something to put out. I think the Justice League Dark stuff that they were putting out, like the Apocalypse thing, I think those stories were actually pretty creative. and plus it also kind of fit into my wheelhouse. But I think it was very creative just because it was like at least something different, where like this kind of brings us back to the like the same old same old. It kind of brings us back to that Batman Year One kind of style of movie, and even though I think that this is actually the second year of Batman. So if you probably go into Batman Year One and then you go right from that to probably watch this, like you'll feel like this is probably the sequel to that, even though it might visually look different or whatever. But yeah, so because I had seen Batman Year One and I thought that movie was great because they gave us a really solid origin of Bruce, and I actually really like that movie. I like the lines that are being delivered in there. Um, but yeah, like I can go back and rewatch that film where this one just kind of feels like a one-off experience. That I was just like, oh, this is a whodunit movie. Okay, so so let's go on to go into spoilers about this movie because there's just a lot of Falcone crap to unpack. So let's get into that. So it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we need to spoil this movie. So there is a villain that is to be called Holiday in this movie because it seems that this guy, for every single holiday, is to go and kill people that are tied to the Falcone family or tied in any way because Falcone might have contracted a person to do a hit on someone, and it might be triads or it might be so and so person. But, anyways, so we get the very beginning of this movie. We're having Falcone with his goons, and he is talking to Bruce Wayne in this office to set up to help us understand why we should invest in Falcone and the Falcone family, because Bruce and Bruce's father had some tie to the Falcone family before this, really forcibly setting us up to say that, like, hey, we should really invest in the Falcone family because Thomas Wayne worked with them once. Yeah, that's a real great investment. Like, yeah, I'm going to really care about like the Falcones and the life and or death of where they are to lead, just because Thomas Wayne worked with them once. Wow, that's great. So Falcone and Bruce are to talk about their past and how it seems that at some point Bruce Wayne could have probably been working with Falcone all along in some timeline somewhere, but that never happened here. So Falcone is to uh talk about belief with Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is to mention it's like, well, I believe in Gotham. Like, I believe in Gotham. I don't believe in what you're kind of doing here. Ba 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 ba. So we queue up the title screen, and then we are to push on to eventually see somebody murdered. Johnny uh, Valiant or Valiant? Valet? Good God, I'm going to ill pronounce this name. Or Johnny Vito? Johnny something. I know it starts with a V. Uh, and I know I was going to end up ill pronounce it, even though I probably went through numerous times to try to see what the name was. I normally would have it on IMDb, but it's kind of difficult via an animated movie to go into IMDb because it won't show the image of who the person is. Um, so I think it's Vidi. There we go. Vidi? Vidi. Uh, I'm going to just say that until it's probably wrong, but I think it's Johnny Vidi. So Johnny Vidi is to die in his bathtub covered in blood with a gun next to him that has bizarrely a Baby Bottle's pacifier as a silencer. So, so Gordon and Gordon and Alfred are getting ready for Halloween. Gordon is to see that Barbara is to be wearing a police officer's outfit, and James gives Barbara like her little badge thing to just be like, okay, like now your costume works. So Gordon is going to go and take his kids trick or treating, but then he ends up getting a call, and he's like, "Well, maybe I'll be short, maybe I'll be brief, maybe I'll just kind of quickly be able to get out of there." And so James's wife has to tell his children like you realize that like how important your father is, and basically he has to like do this thing like 24/7. So like he doesn't really have off time. So and a plus, of course, with holidays, it's probably the crime is like skyrocketed up, so it makes sense for Gordon to have to make a call and have to go back out. Harvey Dent is going and seeing his wife and is asking her, well, like, are you gonna go like are you gonna go and hand out candy for trick or treaters? And she's like, you know what, I'm just not all that interested. Like I just don't really care to do so. And it seems that Harvey's wife has a problem with making a bun in the oven, getting pregnant. And so it seems that Harvey is really pushing on his wife that, like, well, hey, eventually we can have a family. And it seems more and more when Harvey is to push this, his wife continues to be disinterested. But, like, Harvey is just trying to push her maybe into doing some of these activities that would maybe get her interested in children, but it feels obvious that she is not interested. To the point where, like, she has to blatantly tell Harvey towards the end of this film that she's completely disinterested in having a child, a baby, a boogity boogity boo in the oven of things. So Harvey is to come into his home, see the bowl of candy, and then go to his wife and talk to her. And so Harvey is like, well, hey, maybe like you don't go and hand out candy. Maybe we'll just go and grab a movie and we'll do that. And Dent's wife is like, oh, okay, that sounds like a thing we could do. But then immediately Dent is to see the bat signal in the sky. And so he's like, well, like, go ahead and pick that movie. I'll come back and we'll watch the rest of it. So Dent then has to go uh, and try to make his way to the Man of Bats. So both Gordon and Dent are to arrive first, and Gordon is to be smoking a little bit of that pipe. Dent calls him out of it, like calls him out for it. He's like, "Well, hey, like I thought you quit." And Gordon's like, I did quit. It's like, oh, okay, Gordon. Like, I won't tell you. I'll secret between us then that you quit. So, Batman shows up, and so Gordon is to try to introduce Dent to Batman, but they already know one another. It seems like, oh, you must be Batman. Well, you must be Dent. Because Batman knows everybody in this town. Any newcomer that is to come into this town, Batman already has a full length biography of that whole entire person. So, like, anybody who is to come in new into town, he already knows who they all are. So, Gordon is to go and take a bag out with the gun, as if like Gordon just like has just bizarrish evidence in his trench coat at all times. Like, well, hey, yeah, like I have the famous Joker card that is from one murder case. I have I have this gun that was lying around from some other murder. Oh yeah, like I have I have this dead corpse that I've been dragging around from this other murder. Cause like that's just what I do. Like that's how I just get my job done really well that way. By just dragging this stuff around so I can just kind of look over it and just be like, you know what? I figured out the murderer. You would have thought that they would have brought him into some like evidence locker and then shown him that in some evidence locker instead of just dragging it around like it's nobody's business. But I guess it's just an easier transition way to do things, but it is what it just bothers me. So Gordon is just popping out this gun. Like, what if Gordon was the killer? What if Gordon was the killer? Like, wouldn't that like I think they've kind of done that kind of thing before, where Gordon was, but still, like, if Gordon was the killer, like he's just holding up the gun. He has the gun. Like, well, I guess also like people do have to take things out of evidence to like for reasons, but still, I'm making jokes now at this point. So Batman is to see the gun and look at it, investigate it, and see that it's like a 22 and it has uh, a baby's bottle thing as a silencer, and yeah, all of that could be untraceable because because they had filed off the serial number of the gun and so on and so forth. Like somebody went to great lengths to try to not have anyone figure out who this is. I don't know why. So immediately we have Dent, who is just so upset because Johnny, I'm just going to call him Johnny now. Dent had been working on the case with Johnny, and like he thought that going with Johnny was going to lead him into arresting the Falcones. Like he thought that this was going to be like an Al Capone kind of case where like eventually like one small fish could lead him to the big one. And so this guy being killed kind of just ruined that plan for Dent. So Dent is all boo-hooey and all upset, and he's crying on the shoulder of Gordon, and that's too bad for him because he's not really crying, but it's a joke. So, so that is to happen on Halloween. We are to purposely have this killer go and leave a jack-o'-lantern on this by this person's tub, and I guess like have some kind of symbolization of every holiday he is to come in and to kill somebody. So the next thing that is to go and happen is that they kind of have to figure out who this holiday killer is. So Dent is to go back to his home, eventually having and gonna have his wife come in to watch a movie, and all of a sudden his house is to blow the F up. So we come to find out that it seems that Falcone had hired some triads to go and blow up Dent's house. So Batman goes after the triads to eventually go and take out all these triads that were involved in this bomb, to leave a guy named Mick to kind of squill information. Mick goes into this sewer and Batman follows him, but he's not going to attack him whatsoever because Batman knows good and well what is down here and Mick doesn't. Mick is to be assaulted or beaten up by Solomon Grundy, the guy that would normally tell you, like, born on a Tuesday, ate lunch on a Wednesday, all these kinds of other things that, like, the quote of Solomon Grundy. The zombie-esh looking like guy that looks like a Hulk but white-skinned. So evidently Solomon Grundy is just in the sewer, just chilling out. This guy comes in, and so Solomon Grundy just beats the crap out of him. Batman gives him some sweet Thanksgiving dinner later in the movie because he's like, "Hey, Solomon Grundy, thumbs up. Keep the good work there, buddy. I'll go and I'll get you some Thanksgiving meal, cause I'm gonna eventually try to win you over. Eventually remind you, like, hey, when you're gonna beat the living crap out of me when I come into your sewer, I'm gonna remind you about that Thanksgiving dinner there, Solomon Grundy." So this is such a goofy film, and there's a lot of important elements to it, and it's just But anyways, so Thanksgiving has arrived, and so Gordon is trying to eventually see where Dent is exactly being because he's not in his hospital bed. Dent goes and waits out to, I believe, the Falcone home, and is just kind of waiting out there, knowing full well that they were the ones who blew up his house and almost killed his wife. So Gordon goes out to Dent. He's like, "Hey, buddy, like, shouldn't you go inside? Aren't you a little cold? Hey, come with me and my wife. We're gonna have some really good Thanksgiving, and Batman is also going to be delivering some Thanksgiving to Solomon Grundy. And maybe he'll swing over. We don't know. Like, if anything, like, there's no way to like text him or." Like, I wish he had an Instagram or a Snapchat or something. We can get into better contact with him, but all we have is a signal, sadly. So, so I'm having fun with this review. I have to. It's a thing I need to do because this I gotta jazz this up a little bit more. That's how long and stretched of this is. So Dent is like, you know what? No, I'm fine. I'm good right here. And so Gordon gives Dent a gun of his that I guess is probably an unmarked gun. And Gordon tells Dent, well, you know what? Like, I'm going to say right now that I don't know that you have this, but I'm handing it to you right now and telling you that I don't know that I know that you have this. But go and protect your family, Dent, with a gun that you're not actually supposed to have. So Gordon goes on and is just going to pretend that like he basically didn't see Dent there, and he's just going to go back home to eat some good meals with his family. So Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is to eventually showcase who is going to die in Thanksgiving. Well, it's going to be every single one of these triads. Every single one of the triads are eating dinner at their spot, and so someone is going to kill every single one of these triad members off and eventually kind of leave a marker and a gun to say, like, haha, I did it kind of thing. So really, like, we're getting to the point now where, like, every single time there is on some holiday that someone is going to die. Plus, also, we have one of Falcone's men that is starting to get on to Falcone that it's like, hey, man, like, you better keep your house in order. Like, if anything, like, you need to get rid of this guy now because he's ghosting a lot of people. And so Falcone is like, well, that's great that you have your opinion. Dead. And so we have a guy that ends up getting grabbed and gets like chucked down a thing of stairs to just die horribly. So so Falcone is to consistently talk to his son, that is Alberto, who, like, it's kind of astonishing when you actually go through the IMDb or you go through the cast of this movie. I'm like, wow, there is actually some really good people in this movie. Like, there's some people I think from Gotham. There's some people I think from like The Boys. Like, it's kind of a mixed bag of that. So Falcone has a son named Alberto that to me very much like reminds me of like Edward Nigma or like the Riddler. Like, bizarrely, I was thinking, I'm like, is this going to be some kind of bizarrish version of the Riddler that we're not going to understand or whatever? Because to me, like, this guy was doing these like cross puzzles or these like puzzle like things, and his father was kind of ragging him about it. And like Alberto had went to these like high end like schools, and like Falcone like thought that like Alberto like had gotten like his mind warped or whatever because of him going to these schools, that eventually like he got too smart for his own good. Plus like Alberto is kind of assuming that eventually he should take over the family business because he's technically Falcone's son. But really, Falcone is to eventually in this movie just be like, dude, you are never going to take over this family business. Even if I croak tomorrow, you are not going to take over this thing. It's never going to happen. If anything, I would have much rather have give this whole thing up to Bruce Wayne and have him do whatever he will with it, because Falcone goes on onto this like yacht and does this whole speech that he is to mention about the son that he had never had, and of course he is to tip to Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is to be spotlighted and just be like, well, okay, sure, like whatever you want to say, Falcone, but I am not going to be your technical son. Like, I know how dirty your hands are, kind of thing, but that's not exactly what Bruce says. But like that's kind of what like Bruce kind of like would say if he really wanted to say any number of things during that point in time. So because Alberto is just kind of like stepping into the like almost into the light, just to think like, oh, he's mentioning me, like, wow, he finally has praised me for once instead of like ridiculing me. And like Alberto almost puts like one step out, and then all of a sudden Falcone is actually talking about Bruce Wayne. Isn't that great? So uh like I'm gonna go in a very roundabout way of talking about this film, which it's either you've seen it or you haven't. We also go into Catwoman in this movie. So Catwoman is to consistently try and steal, of course, from any number of people, even when she doesn't have the Catwoman costume on. Uh, but anyways, we are having uh, Batman kind of chase after her, and then eventually they are to like. It seems that there is this like romance there, but it does kind of feel like a lot of shades of like Batman Returns a lot, where like Catwoman is like touching onto Batman's chest and is like, "Hey, like maybe something's gonna happen here." Um, but Batman is to eventually be chasing Catwoman, and Catwoman is to give uh, Batman a warehouse of Falcones that is to have this huge stack of cash. So Batman is just kind of like, okay, why is it that you're like, you could have taken all this money, you could have stolen all this stuff, and you could have gotten pretty wealthy from it. Why are you helping me out? Like, why are you doing this? And Catwoman doesn't really have much of an answer. So Batman brings in Dent to all this, and kind of like how we have in The Dark Knight, where because Batman has to be the Dark Knight, and so Dent has to be the White Knight. So Batman has to do things in the shadows, and of course Dent has to do everything in the light. So so both Dent and Batman are trying to come up with a consensus of, well, what should we do with this money? If anything, it's going to take too long to get out of here. It's going to like, how exactly are we going to be able to get this money out of here? And so they also come to the consensus, well, Catwoman helps. Just say, how about you just burn all the money so that way no one can have it? And so Dent is like, well, you know what? That is a pretty good thing to do, but that also seems very underhanded. And like it seems kind of like a very dirty thing to do. So, so Batman is like, well, you know what? It seems like you're two heads about things, because we consistently have to keep referencing the whole Two-Face thing to Harvey Dent without trying and actually doing it, because Harvey Dent never becomes Two-Face in this entire film, which is a severe disappointment, because I think they were continually teasing about it repetitiously through this film, to the point of eventually making you think that Harvey Dent is going to turn into Two-Face, and then when he is to turn his side to James Gordon, we realize that like Harvey Dent does not have a burnt side of his face. So like it teases the crap out of Two-Face, and I don't like that at all. I think that's a garbage thing to do. I get that Harvey Dent has this tying of Two-Face, but I think it's a kind of underhanded thing to do in a movie like this. Plus, also, I think people were desperate to try to get a lot more Batman stuff in these movies than what there was, because it seems a lot about Falcone, which just seems like the boringest route to go to. Uh, so we are. Plus, also, like, it kind of seemed like when we saw Alberto, like, I was thinking, I'm like, could Alberto actually also be, like, the Joker in some kind of disguise where, like, we never really saw what this Joker was, and, like, could it have been Alberto this entire time because Joker never actually had a origin story in this variation? Because it seems like the Joker and Alberto could have almost looked one and the same to me at some point. Kind of like, and that would have been a kind of cool mystery to have, but that kind of gets snuffed out too. So, so Batman makes the consensus when both Dent and him are figuring out what the heck to do with this money. And so Batman makes the consensus, well, how about heads and we burn the money. So Dent makes the coin flip and it comes up heads. They burn the money and leave. So burnt money, great, cool, great, that's awesome. So uh, so we are to eventually have the next holiday, which is Christmas. We also have seemingly Batman going to the Calendar Man and asking him, like, dude, are you, like, tied to this? Like, could you have any kind of, like, connection of what is going on? Or could you possibly know who the holiday killer is? Because considering how Calendar Man would go and kill people on certain holidays, like, really there's like a copycat of Calendar Man going on, and they're trying to figure out who exactly it is. So, and I kind of like that. I've always wanted them to actually do something with Calendar Man, but they never have. Like, man, if they could have just had Calendar Man in some opening sequence of some movie, man, would I would have been won over by that. Honestly, if they would have started this movie with Calendar Man getting caught, I would have been completely fine with that. I would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, a lot of garbage through this movie, but a great opening sequence. But no, they don't show that at all. And I thought that that would have been a cool thing to do to, like, kind of showcase where this movie is heading. And it would have been a lot more exciting than Batman talking to Falcone, because I thought that was just a boring intro. But it just sets up the movie, and so it has to be that way. So Batman talks to Calendar Man to try to see what Calendar Man could think of who this holiday killer could be, and it really just turns a bubkiss nothing. As well as, like, there has to be this huge mystery of who this guy could actually be, because I'm probably assuming it probably has to probably be Dent at this point, because who the heck else could it be? Uh, Put your bidding out now, because I'm assuming sometime soon there's going to be part two that's going to come out, and it seems that part two is already going to tell us, spoilers, that there's going to probably be a Two-Face in that film, because it already feels like it's, like, heading that way, but it also is, like, I've seen the cover art for the part two. So so in this one, so to so. Christmas. So, Christmas, thank God, because let's get into the Joker stuff. So, Dent is to come home to realize that his wife had gone shopping, and so Joker is to appear in Dent's home and reconfigure some holiday joy with his variation of holiday joy, which is kind of like putting skeletons and weird stuff into this tree, which looks really weird. So, so immediately uh, we have Joker, who is telling Dent that yeah, his wife has gone shopping and Joker isn't going to do anything with that. Plus, also, Dent, surefire enough, is probably going to get socks this year for Christmas. So, nothing really eventful. So, uh, so we, like, every bit of this are assuming, oh, okay, here's where we're going to get the Two-Face moment. Here's where we're going to get it. And then, no, it doesn't happen. So, Joker goes off to try to make it seem like Dent is the killer of this, even going and taking out the gun that had been killed by numerous other people that had the baby pacifier on the tip of it and whatever. And so this is to kind of showcase that, oh, is it Joker that it's doing this? Because it seems like Joker has to be tied to every single story and has to be a murderer of every single thing. Like the Killing Joke was him. Like this would probably just be him as well, because he has to have numerous things to just kind of like be attached to somehow or another to seem like it is him, but it isn't. But really, it kind of comes to that same old point that Joker obviously always wants credit for things. He doesn't want to be this mysterious man. He wants to come right out and say, hey, I'm Joker, and I'm murdering all these people. Isn't that great? Plus, also, Joker doesn't have a reason for killing Capone's movie, or Capone's people in this movie. That feels kind of obvious. Like, why would Joker go out of his way to kill villains? Doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't feel like Joker's MO to kill other villains off unless, like, there was some actual reason for him to do it. Like, maybe it's tying to Joker's origin, but still, like, if Joker would have been the culprit, why would he wait till of now to have done this? Why couldn't he have killed all of Capone's men off in his origin story, in his origin way of doing things? It would make a lot more sense. But to each their own. So everybody in town is to be at this one spot in town. And so Joker realizes that. And so Joker goes on to have a plane try to, I guess, drop off Joker toxin or Joker gas or whichever, Joker fart juice. I don't know what it's called. So we're kind of back to that, and I actually do enjoy it, because there's sometimes where Batman is to see that people are left with a permanent grin, and I like going back to that. I like going back to the simplicity of Joker, where he is kind of Joker toxining people, that is to leave them with smiles on their faces. I like that whole way of doing things, and plus it also helps you to actually showcase who Joker is actually killing, because then it actually goes like, oh yeah, like that's like Joker's calling card, and you can actually know that Joker had killed somebody. So Joker is going to release gas onto a plane, and of course Batman is going to go and stop him, and we have to have forcibly, bizarrely in the scene, have Batman like asking Joker why is he going and doing all of this, and Joker is like, well, isn't it obvious? Like, every single person in town is all in this one spot. Like, I can kill everybody in town like fairly easily, and plus any number of one of these people could actually be the real true holiday killer. And so like it's basically a 50-50 shot that eventually I'm going to kill the holiday killer by eventually just dousing on everyone in town. So Batman, of course, stops Joker from releasing these toxins, and of course takes him down and arrests him and all kinds of stuff. Whoopity doopity. And so, whoopity doopity. So, since Batman can't just arrive at the conclusion that it has to be Joker in this one, immediately we have kind of Batman coming up with the consensus that there has to be somebody smart that is putting all this together that can really hide himself. and Batman comes up with a consensus that it has to be Alberto, because Alberto is knocking every single person off that would be able to get the throne when Falcone is to die. So evidently, so Alberto is quite possibly wiping out all of his competition, is what Batman is to naturally assume. So we are on this yacht, and so we are to have this party that is going on with Falcone and family, and so we have Bruce talking to Selena Kyle, who normally I would mix up with the girl from the very first uh, Batman movie, because I never remember what her name is. So and I'm trying to think of what it is now, but that's just a pointless endeavor. So going here, so Batman and Catwoman in their other alter egos decide that they're like, well, you know what, like this has been fun, but like what we're doing just isn't gonna work. Like it just isn't going to happen, and like kind of both of them are just kind of like, nah, like what we had was fun, but so they break up, and so Bruce turns into Batman and is to confront Alberto, thinking that he is the killer, because it's like he has the most motive, and also it seems like he's the most likely to be the killer, and he would probably get away with it better than anybody else because they would probably underestimate him. So Batman is trying to get Alberto to confess, and all of a sudden we are to start seeing bullets come into the fray of Alberto while fireworks are to go off because it's New Year's now. Because they keep going from holiday to holiday to holiday. So now it's New Year's and fireworks are popping off. And so also is fireworks going into Alberto, aka bullets. So Alberto is to get littered with bullets, and like I want to say that it's probably at least probably 30 bullets just being tossed into Alberto, probably 45, maybe 100 bullets, maybe a million bullets just be pattering into Alberto, while Batman is just watching on as Alberto is numerously getting shot and doing jack crap nothing. It's like, well, hey, like I just saw one bullet go in, and so I'm just gonna just continue to see this mass murderer just fire upon Alberto and not do anything, because maybe after the first bullet, maybe Alberto would have survived after that, but no. Alberto needs to consistently keep getting hit with bullets so he can conveniently fall off of this balcony-ish like thing to fall into the water so he can go right into the uh, propeller of this ship, get grinded into shark meat, and just be in the gross and disgusting waters. So Batman is to, after watching numerous bullets go into Alberto and just not having a care in the world because he's a villainous person that he just thought was the killer and was incorrect, Batman starts running after this murderous man to eventually get Bupkis nowhere with that. And so really we're just to like lead this with there being no real true killer found. The guy has to leave his calling card and get the heck out of there. But eventually they go into like finding Bupkis nothing out of this. So really towards the very end of this movie, we just have like Dent and James and Batman all asking like, well, hey, what's next? Like, what could be next for this adventure kind of thing? Like, it kind of feels like they're obviously telling us that there's going to be another part out of this, because why would they call this part one anyways? It feels very obvious and kind of forced that they're going to tell us, yeah, there's going to be more to this adventure. They're like, it feels like they kind of milked this movie out, where like they couldn't have solved this murderer in this movie because they want to kind of leave it to like, well, we have more holidays to cover in the sequel movie, Like, man, I can't wait till Easter, or I can't wait till the next uh, St. Patrick's Day is right around the corner for more murderers to happen. Yeah, I can't wait for more murderers. So yeah, like that's a bulk of what is to happen within this movie. There's some stuff that I tried to rush through and I didn't get through a lot of details of this one. I'm assuming that probably more than likely that this probably has to be Dent, who is the holiday killer. If I'm wrong, I hope I am, because that would just kind of feel like a very just like predictable thing, but it would also just be like, nah, like this, nah, I like, I kind of like Hush was just like an okay film that eventually had like I think a decent ending to it, but going into this one, I was like, there is no real true decent thing about this movie. Like it's cute. There's cute moments, especially when um kind of Bruce and Alfred are at Halloween, and like Batman is mentioning that it's kind of like it's a goofy kind of holiday, and Alfred is like, oh yeah, like having people dress up in spandex and tights and putting fear into others. Yeah, that's a really like goofy holiday when somebody does it 24/7. Um, but yeah, uh like there was fun parts about this, but overall it just feels like the same old same old. Plus it also just feels like so many things that we've already seen. And so like I was waiting for that like kind of like a slow part at first, but eventually it was going to ramp up. And I think without the Joker thing, I thought that this movie would have been boring as F. So luckily the Joker came in here and did something, or otherwise this movie would have been the most boring uh, adaptation or just DC animated thing that I would have seen. So thank God for Joker. So with that said, and like I actually hated that. I'm like, so Joker is probably gonna have to be the best single handed thing in this movie. Because thank God he was in this, or otherwise I would have just been like, God, this sucks. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.